If you have belly fat, if you have that stubborn, round, firm midsection that will not go away no matter what you do, I need you to understand something right now that could change the way you think about your health forever. That belly fat is not just cosmetic. It is not just an inconvenience when you try to button your jeans. It is not just something that makes you self-conscious at the beach. That belly fat is an active, living, hormone-producing organ that is waging a silent war against every major organ system in your body at this very moment. It is attacking your heart. It is attacking your liver. It is attacking your kidneys. It is attacking your brain. And it is doing it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, without any symptoms until the damage becomes catastrophic. I am not talking about the soft, pinchable fat that sits just under your skin. That subcutaneous fat, the fat you can grab with your hand, is relatively harmless from a metabolic standpoint. I am talking about something far more dangerous: visceral fat, the hard, deep fat that accumulates inside your abdominal cavity, wrapping around your liver, your kidneys, your intestines, your pancreas, and your other vital organs like a toxic blanket. This visceral fat is fundamentally different from the fat on your thighs or your arms. It behaves differently, it communicates differently with your body, and it kills differently. Today, I am going to explain exactly what visceral fat does to your organs, why it is so much more dangerous than any other type of body fat, and exactly what you need to do to eliminate it before it eliminates you. Let me start with the science that will change everything you think you know about fat. For decades, scientists viewed body fat as passive storage tissue. You ate too much, the excess calories got stored as fat, and it just sat there inertly until you burned it off through diet and exercise. This understanding was completely, fundamentally wrong. We now know that adipose tissue, particularly visceral adipose tissue, is one of the most metabolically active organs in the entire human body. It is not a passive warehouse. It is a chemical factory that produces and releases dozens of biologically active substances directly into your bloodstream around the clock. Visceral fat cells produce and secrete inflammatory cytokines, chemical messengers that trigger inflammation throughout your entire body. They produce interleukin-6, tumor necrosis factor alpha, C-reactive protein, and dozens of other inflammatory mediators. These chemicals circulate through your bloodstream and cause chronic, systemic, low-grade inflammation that damages every tissue they touch. Your blood vessel linings become inflamed, accelerating atherosclerosis and raising blood pressure. Your liver becomes inflamed, leading to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Your pancreas becomes inflamed, impairing insulin production. Your brain becomes inflamed, accelerating cognitive decline and increasing dementia risk. Every organ system in your body is under constant inflammatory assault from the chemical warfare being waged by your visceral fat. But the inflammatory chemicals are only part of the story. Visceral fat also disrupts your hormonal balance in ways that create devastating cascading effects throughout your body. First, visceral fat produces excess estrogen. Fat cells contain an enzyme called aromatase that converts testosterone into estrogen. The more visceral fat you carry, the more aromatase activity you have, and the more estrogen floods your system. In men, this excess estrogen contributes to further fat accumulation, muscle loss, low energy, decreased libido, and cardiovascular risk. In women, particularly postmenopausal women, this excess estrogen increases the risk of hormone-sensitive cancers, including breast cancer and endometrial cancer. The relationship between visceral fat and cancer risk is one of the most well-established and alarming connections in all of oncology research. Second, visceral fat produces a chemical called resistin that directly promotes insulin resistance. When your cells become resistant to insulin, your blood sugar levels rise. Your pancreas has to produce more and more insulin to force sugar into your cells. These chronically elevated insulin levels drive further fat accumulation, particularly visceral fat accumulation, creating a vicious cycle that spirals toward type 2 diabetes. And as I discussed in a previous video, Chronically elevated insulin directly stimulates your liver to produce more cholesterol and promotes the formation of dangerous small, dense LDL particles that destroy your arteries. Third, visceral fat reduces the production of a critically important hormone called adiponectin. Adiponectin is a protective hormone that improves insulin sensitivity, reduces inflammation, and protects blood vessel walls from atherosclerotic damage. It is essentially your body's built-in cardiovascular protection system. But the more visceral fat you accumulate, the less adiponectin your fat cells produce. It is an inverse relationship. The fatter you get in the visceral compartment, the less cardiovascular protection you have. Your body's defense system is being shut down by the very tissue that is attacking it. Now let me walk you through the specific organ damage that visceral fat causes, because the list is staggering in its scope and severity. The liver. Your liver is ground zero for visceral fat damage because visceral fat drains directly into the portal vein, which feeds directly into your liver. The inflammatory chemicals and free fatty acids released by visceral fat pour straight into your liver tissue in concentrated form. The result is non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, or NAFLD, which now affects approximately 1 in 4 adults worldwide. In its early stages, NAFLD causes fat to accumulate inside liver cells, impairing their function. As it progresses, it causes liver inflammation, called non-alcoholic steatohepatitis or NASH, which leads to liver scarring, called fibrosis, which can progress to cirrhosis and liver failure. NAFLD has become the fastest growing cause of liver transplant need in the developed world. And the primary driver is visceral fat, the heart. Visceral fat attacks your heart through multiple simultaneous pathways. The chronic inflammation accelerates atherosclerosis in your coronary arteries. The insulin resistance promotes dangerous cholesterol profiles. The hormonal disruptions increase blood pressure. And there is a specific type of fat called epicardial fat that accumulates directly on the surface of your heart, surrounding the coronary arteries and the heart muscle itself. This epicardial fat releases inflammatory chemicals in direct contact with the heart tissue, promoting coronary artery disease, atrial fibrillation, and heart failure at a local level that is independent of your systemic inflammatory state. Research has shown that the amount of epicardial fat is a stronger predictor of cardiovascular events than many traditional risk factors. The kidneys. Visceral fat compresses the kidneys physically, increasing the pressure within the kidney tissue. This mechanical compression forces the kidneys to work harder to filter blood. Combined with the inflammatory chemicals, the insulin resistance, and the elevated blood pressure that visceral fat produces, the net effect is progressive kidney damage that mirrors the early stages of chronic kidney disease. Studies have found that visceral fat mass is independently associated with reduced kidney function, increased proteinuria, and higher rates of chronic kidney disease progression. The brain. This is perhaps the most alarming area of research. Visceral fat and the inflammation it produces have been directly linked to accelerated brain aging, cognitive decline, reduced brain volume, and significantly increased risk of Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia. The inflammatory cytokines produced by visceral fat cross the blood-brain barrier and activate inflammatory processes within the brain itself. They damage neurons. They impair the formation of new neural connections. They accelerate the accumulation of amyloid beta plaques and tau tangles, the hallmark pathological features of Alzheimer's disease. MRI studies have shown that people with higher levels of visceral fat have measurably smaller brain volumes, particularly in the hippocampus, the brain region critical for memory and learning. The pancreas. Visceral fat accumulates around and within the pancreas itself, directly impairing the ability of the beta cells to produce adequate insulin. This intrapancreatic fat deposition is a key driver of the progression from insulin resistance to full-blown type 2 diabetes. Research has shown that even modest reductions in pancreatic fat can restore beta cell function and reverse diabetes in many patients, which is one of the mechanisms behind the dramatic diabetes remission seen with significant weight loss. So how do you know how much visceral fat you actually have? The most accessible measurement is your waist circumference. Measure around your waist at the level of your belly button while standing and breathing normally. For men, a waist circumference above 40 inches, approximately 102 centimeters, indicates dangerous levels of visceral fat. For women, the threshold is above 35 inches, approximately 88 centimeters. But even below these thresholds, any increase in waist circumference over time indicates accumulating visceral fat that should be addressed. Another useful metric is your waist-to-hip ratio. Measure your waist at the narrowest point and your hips at the widest point. Divide waist by hips. For men, a ratio above 0.95 indicates elevated cardiovascular risk from visceral fat. For women, a ratio above 0.85 is the danger threshold. The gold standard for measuring visceral fat is a DEXA scan or an MRI, which can precisely quantify the amount of fat inside your abdominal cavity versus under your skin. If you have access to a DEXA scan, it provides the most accurate assessment of your visceral fat burden. Now let me give you the evidence-based strategies for eliminating visceral fat, because the good news is that visceral fat is actually more responsive to intervention than subcutaneous fat. When you make the right changes, visceral fat is often the first type of fat your body burns. Strategy number 1. Dramatically reduce refined carbohydrates and sugar. Visceral fat accumulation is driven primarily by chronically elevated insulin levels, and nothing spikes insulin more aggressively than refined carbohydrates and added sugars. White bread, pasta, white rice, sugary drinks, candy, pastries, and processed foods made with refined flour and added sugar should be dramatically reduced or eliminated. Replace them with vegetables, legumes, nuts, seeds, whole fruits, and modest amounts of intact whole grains. Strategy number 2. Prioritize protein at every meal. Adequate protein intake preserves muscle mass during weight loss, increases metabolic rate through the thermic effect of food, improves satiety so you naturally eat less, and helps stabilize blood sugar levels. Aim for approximately 0.7 to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight per day from sources like poultry, fish, eggs, legumes, Greek yogurt, and lean meats. Strategy number 3. Incorporate resistance training at least 3 times per week. Resistance training is the single most effective form of exercise for reducing visceral fat because it builds muscle, and muscle is the primary tissue that burns fat and processes blood sugar. More muscle means higher resting metabolic rate, improved insulin sensitivity, and a metabolic environment that preferentially burns visceral fat for fuel. You do not need to become a bodybuilder. Body weight exercises, resistance bands, or light weights performed consistently 3 times per week produce significant visceral fat reduction. Strategy number 4. Add high-intensity interval training 2 to 3 times per week. Research consistently shows that interval training produces greater visceral fat reduction than steady-state cardio of the same duration. Short bursts of intense effort followed by recovery periods create a metabolic afterburn that continues burning fat for hours after the workout. Even 15 to 20 minutes of interval training produces measurable results. Strategy number 5. Prioritize sleep. Sleep deprivation is one of the most powerful drivers of visceral fat accumulation that exists. Just 1 week of sleeping 5 hours per night instead of 8 has been shown to significantly increase visceral fat deposition. Poor sleep elevates cortisol, increases hunger hormones, impairs insulin sensitivity, and creates a hormonal environment that preferentially stores fat in the visceral compartment. Aim for 7 to 8 hours of quality sleep every night. Strategy number 6. Manage chronic stress. Cortisol, your primary stress hormone, specifically promotes the deposition of fat in the visceral compartment. Chronically stressed individuals accumulate more visceral fat than unstressed individuals even when caloric intake is identical. Daily stress management practices including meditation, deep breathing, walks in nature, social connection, and professional counseling when needed are not luxuries. They are visceral fat reduction strategies. Strategy number 7. Eliminate or dramatically reduce alcohol. Alcohol is processed by your liver, and the metabolic byproducts of alcohol metabolism promote fat storage in and around the liver and throughout the visceral compartment. The term beer belly exists for a reason. Even moderate alcohol consumption contributes to visceral fat accumulation. Eliminating alcohol entirely, or reducing it to rare occasions, can produce dramatic reductions in visceral fat within weeks. Here is the most important thing I want you to understand. Visceral fat is not a cosmetic issue. It is a medical emergency, hiding in plain sight. It is an active, malicious, hormone-producing organ that is systematically destroying your liver, your heart, your kidneys, your brain, and your pancreas while you worry about how your clothes fit. The number on your bathroom scale matters far less than the circumference of your waist. You can be normal weight and still carry dangerous levels of visceral fat, a condition called TOFI, which stands for thin outside, fat inside, and you can be moderately overweight with most of your fat in the subcutaneous compartment and be at relatively low metabolic risk. Measure your waist. Know your number. And if that number is above the danger threshold, treat it with the same urgency you would treat high blood pressure or high blood sugar. Because visceral fat is causing both of those conditions, and it is causing dozens of other problems that you do not even know about yet. Let me also address some of the most dangerous myths about belly fat that keep people trapped in ineffective strategies and prevent them from making real progress. Myth number 1. You can spot reduce belly fat with ab exercises. This is perhaps the most persistent fitness myth in existence, and it is completely false. Doing hundreds of crunches, sit-ups, planks, or any other abdominal exercise will strengthen your abdominal muscles, but it will not selectively burn the visceral fat sitting behind those muscles. Fat loss is systemic. Your body decides where to burn fat based on hormonal signals, genetics, and metabolic factors, not based on which muscles you are exercising. The strategies I outlined, reducing insulin through dietary changes, resistance training for the whole body, interval training, sleep optimization, and stress management, address the hormonal and metabolic drivers that determine where fat is stored and burned. Ab exercises alone will give you strong abdominal muscles buried under a layer of unchanged visceral fat. Myth number 2. Low-fat diets are the best way to lose belly fat. This myth is a tragic remnant of the low-fat diet craze of the 1980s and 90s that has been thoroughly debunked by modern nutrition science. When food manufacturers removed fat from products, they replaced it with sugar and refined carbohydrates to maintain flavor. These sugar-laden low-fat products spiked insulin levels far more than the fat they replaced, driving more visceral fat accumulation, not less. Healthy fats from sources like olive oil, avocados, nuts, seeds, and fatty fish do not cause visceral fat accumulation. They actually improve insulin sensitivity, reduce inflammation, and promote satiety that prevents overeating. The enemy of visceral fat is not dietary fat. It is refined carbohydrates and sugar. Myth number 3. Cardio is the best exercise for belly fat. While cardiovascular exercise burns calories and has important health benefits, steady-state cardio, like jogging at the same pace for 45 minutes, is significantly less effective at reducing visceral fat than resistance training and high-intensity interval training. In fact, excessive steady-state cardio without resistance training can actually cause muscle loss, which reduces your metabolic rate and makes visceral fat accumulation more likely over time. The ideal exercise prescription for visceral fat reduction combines resistance training 3 times per week with 2 to 3 sessions of high-intensity interval training, supplemented by daily walking or other low-intensity movement. Myth number 4. Supplements can melt belly fat. No supplement has been proven in rigorous clinical trials to selectively reduce visceral fat. The supplement industry makes billions of dollars every year selling products labeled as belly fat burners, metabolism boosters, and fat-targeting formulas. The vast majority of these products have no meaningful effect on visceral fat. Some contain stimulants that temporarily increase heart rate and metabolic rate but do not produce lasting fat loss. Others contain ingredients with theoretical mechanisms but no clinical proof of efficacy. Save your money. The interventions that actually work, dietary changes, resistance training, interval exercise, sleep, and stress management, cost nothing or very little. Myth number 5. Belly fat is just a normal part of aging. While it is true that hormonal changes associated with aging, including declining testosterone in men and declining estrogen in women, can promote visceral fat accumulation, this does not mean it is inevitable or acceptable. Age-related hormonal shifts create a tendency toward visceral fat storage, but that tendency can be powerfully counteracted through the lifestyle strategies I described. Many people in their 60s, 70s, and beyond maintain minimal visceral fat through consistent attention to diet, exercise, sleep, and stress management. Age creates a challenge. It does not create a destiny. The bottom line is this: every strategy I have given you today is within your control. You do not need expensive treatments. You do not need surgery. You do not need magic supplements. You need information, which you now have, and you need the decision to act on it. The visceral fat inside your abdomen is not going to remove itself. It is going to continue producing inflammatory chemicals, disrupting your hormones, and systematically damaging your organs until you take deliberate, sustained action to eliminate it. And the beautiful truth about visceral fat is that it responds to these interventions relatively quickly. Many people see measurable reductions in waist circumference within 4 to 6 weeks of implementing the strategies I outlined. Within 3 months, the metabolic improvements can be dramatic, with significant reductions in inflammatory markers, blood sugar, insulin levels, triglycerides, and blood pressure. Your organs begin to recover. Your liver starts to heal. Your insulin sensitivity improves. Your risk profile transforms, all from changes that are entirely within your power to make. The question is not whether these strategies work. The science is unequivocal. The question is whether you will implement them, whether you will prioritize your visceral health over the convenience of the habits that created the problem, whether you love yourself and your family enough to fight for your health every single day. Type in the comments your waist measurement. Be brave. Be honest. And type "fight back" if you are ready to start eliminating your visceral fat using the strategies I outlined today. Share this video with everyone who has been struggling with belly fat and thinks it is just a cosmetic problem. They need to know the truth about what that fat is doing inside their body right now. Subscribe and turn on notifications. I will keep bringing you the truth about your health, even when that truth is uncomfortable, even when it challenges what you have believed for years. I will see you in the next video. Measure your waist tonight and start fighting back tomorrow. Your organs are counting on you.